If there's one thing that I could say about movies, it's that no idea is truly perfect. Well, except maybe what if every crime was legal for 12 hours one night every year? That's The Purge, a concept that should have carried a franchise forever. Well, you guys already know what's coming. The Purge movies kind of suck, but how did they manage to do it? See, on paper, The Purge truly sounds like a stroke of genius. It's a dystopian idea that could explore human nature, class inequality, violence, and government control. You'd think a setup like this would lead to either a sharp satire or a tense, thought-provoking thriller. It could have gone the gritty 80s dystopia route or leaned into dark humor with over-the-top violence on the surface and really smart commentary underneath. So imagine the disappointment when the first Purge movie, released in 2013, turned out to be essentially a generic home invasion thriller that barely scratched the surface of its own idea. Instead of showing us the streets tearing themselves apart or how different people would actually navigate one night of legal chaos, the film locks us up with one upper-class family hiding behind locked doors. Wow. Wow. What the fuck? Yeah, that's it. That's basically it for like 90 fucking minutes. The whole country is supposedly losing its mind, and we're stuck babysitting a bunch of rich people we barely know. Why are we supposed to care about them? All that potential for wild, unsettling storytelling wasted on something that feels smaller and even more claustrophobic than a single house. I mean, to be fair, the filmmakers seem to realize that they had messed up the concept. The sequels tried to expand the scope beyond that single house, taking us to the city streets during Purge Night, focusing slightly more on class warfare angle and upping the scale of the chaos. Slowly, they tried to make each film just a little bit bigger. Anarchy 2014 lets us see riots and vigilantes in Los Angeles. Then Election Year 2016 added overt political themes, and then the first Purge 2018, which probably should have been the starting point. I mean, it's a prequel showing how the whole thing even started. You know, that actually sounds pretty interesting. Definitely a lot more interesting than a bunch of fucking Muppets sitting inside of a house all the time. That's the movie people probably wanted in the first place, so why did it take them 3 other films to get there? Whose idea was it to save the origin story until the 4th movie? It feels like releasing the pilot episode after season 3, and who in their right mind would actually do that? Lastly, we got the Forever Purge 2021, which tried to push the concept even further by saying, what if the purge never ends? Yeah, I remember watching this on streaming a couple of years ago, and honestly, I'm just speechless. It might genuinely be one of the worst fucking movies I've ever sat through. I rewatched it for this video, and shockingly, it didn't get any better. The whole thing is just really forced, like some studio executives scribbled on a whiteboard. How do we increase ticket sales? And then they just decide to make the Purge bigger. Yeah, that's basically the entire pitch. And the result is 2 hours of contrived, joyless bullshit, and honestly, I'd rather take a shotgun to the head than ever see through that movie ever again. And do you know what really pisses me off? It's that I felt this way after every single entry. I'd go in with this tiny sliver of hope, like maybe this time they'll finally nail it, or not even nail it, just make a good movie. Maybe this will be the one that proves the idea wasn't a total waste of time. And every single time, without fail, it wasn't just a bad movie, it was another reminder that this franchise never had a fucking clue what to do with its own premise. It just kept throwing more noise, more blood, more stakes at the screen. Put quotes on that stakes. And somehow, it always added up to less. Listen, right, it's just the fact that even with all the room to play that an idea like this will bring forward, this franchise never once managed to cough up a good movie. Not a single one. And somehow, instead of getting better, each sequel just sank lower. This might sound like me just being a bitter asshole, but let me lay it out for you. You can judge for yourself. One of the biggest problems is that the series wants us to buy into a world that just doesn't make any sense, even by dystopian standards. The whole idea that for 364 days, everything is perfect and crime-free because everyone lets out their rage on one night isn't just absurd, it's borderline insulting to the audience intelligence. The movies posture like they're making some profound statement about human nature, that we're inherently violent and need to let it all out. but the execution is just shit. To make it even worse, the films act like they're delivering razor-sharp social satire, when in reality their grasp of society is flimsy at best and flat-out embarrassing at worst. The lack of subtlety in these movies is almost laughable at times. By the sequels, the social commentary just got more and more heavy-handed. Election year featured a far-right purge party versus an upstanding liberal politician who wants to end the purge. Not exactly a nuanced political allegory there. This film even marketed itself with the slogan "Keep America Great" in 2016, a not-so-veiled riff on real-world politics. The first Purge, not the first movie, like the movie The First Purge, I know, these names are ridiculous, tried to tackle race, depicting how the government's purge experimentally deliberately targets poor black communities, a worthy topic, but what do they do with it? Well, of course they see it as a perfect opportunity to cram in as much cringe-inducing dialogue as possible. Like, for example, there's a black gangster shouting, "You pussy-grabbing motherfucker," at a villain, just to riff on a notorious Trump quote. And the Forever Purge wanted to comment on immigration and white nationalism, but somehow thought it'd be a good idea to give a stereotypical racist character a heroic redemption arc, with Mexican protagonists literally helping redeem the racist. You can practically hear the audience rolling their eyes here. In short, The Purge wants to come off as a deep, provocative, but it's about as subtle as its own siren. Every theme gets spelled out in big neon letters, followed by a smug pat on the back for being quote-unquote topical. The problem is the message feels hollow. The series acts like it's edgy and controversial, but really it's just yelling violence and racism are bad. Which, sure, I mean, who's arguing otherwise, right? They are probably preaching the most obvious ideas that most viewers already agree with without adding any new perspective to it. That's why as satire, The Purge utterly fails. It never challenges the audience, it just bludgeons them with simplistic messages and congratulates itself for it. You might be thinking, maybe I'm just a little bit harsh. No, I'm not too harsh. See, another issue that drags the franchise down is its identity crisis. Is The Purge trying to be a fun, schlocky horror thriller that you watch with a bucket of popcorn, or a serious piece of dystopian art with a message? It of course tries to be both, and that ends up undermining everything. On one hand, the movies are clearly marketed on their violent spectacle, those creepy purger masks, the jump scares, the creative skills, all of that shit. By design, this franchise wants to tap into the audience's morbid curiosity, and indeed, all 5 films gleefully showcase gruesome violence and carnage. That I can certainly agree on. However, on the other hand, the creator James DeMonaco repeatedly insists the whole thing is meant to be a critique of Americans' obsession with violence and guns. You see the contradiction there? You can't really condemn violence while simultaneously selling your movie on how cool the violence is. The hypocrisy is pretty hard to ignore here. The Purge spends plenty of time pointing out how ugly violence is, yet it clearly revels in surging up blood-soaked action for the audience to cheer at. It wants to scold society with one hand while handing out the very thrills it claims to condemn with the other. That contradiction leaves its message feeling pretty hollow. By the time the big finale hits, it's obvious the movie is more interested in riling up the crowd than sparking reflection. Talk about mixed signals. Speaking of mixed signals, did you know half of you watching aren't subscribed? Okay, I lied, it's actually closer to 99%, so what are you waiting on? Subscribe! Tone-wise, the franchise is all over the place. Sometimes it's grim and serious, like it wants to be this chilling reflection of American society. Other times it feels like a ridiculous comic book, with villains so exaggerated they're basically cartoon characters. This inconsistency totally undercuts whatever social commentary the movies are trying to make. By the time we reach the Forever Purge, where the story leans into kind of over-the-top Civil War fantasy, it feels less like social critique and more like the franchise is parodying itself, just without realizing it. And I mean, if that wasn't embarrassing enough, there's a parody of The Purge with higher IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes score than anything the franchise itself ever put out. I'm talking about the Rick and Morty episode, Look Who's Purging Now. It's 20 minutes long, a throwaway gag in season 2, yet fans will tell you it captured the idea of the Purge way better than the actual Purge movies ever did. That's kind of rough. So what did Rick and Morty actually get right? It sneaks in characters beats that actually comment on violence instead of just showing it. Morty starts off horrified, then sooner or later gives in into chaos and actually starts purging. Rick, who of course normally couldn't care less, recoils when he sees how ugly the Purge really is. In other words, a cartoon manages to say more about how violence seduces people and how disgusting it looks up close in 20 minutes than the films do in 2 hours. But most importantly, it remembers what it is. The episode is fast, funny, and clear about its goal. Rick and Morty just want to get the hell out of that insane planet alive. Compare that to the films, which often drown in self-serious subplots or drag out endless hide-and-wait sequences until you're begging for the credits. By the end, the show makes it pretty clear what it thinks of the Purge. The whole idea is ridiculous. The movies, meanwhile, keep bizarrely trying to convince us it would work. So, in other words, the idea clearly struck a nerve. People loved joking about it, which just proves how much potential the franchise had, and just how badly they fumbled. Given all these problems, it's no surprise that the hype around the Purge fizzled out. The first movie back in 2013 was a box office shocker, nearly 90 million on a pretty tiny budget. Well, mainly because the premise and marketing hooked people. Everyone thought they were about to see something wild and thought-provoking. Instead, like I mentioned before, they got a pretty generic home invasion flick with some cool masks slapped on top. Still, curiosity carried over to the sequel, Anarchy 2014, which actually made more money because fans hoped it would finally show the real Purge out in the streets. And sure, it did, to a point. But by the third and fourth entries, the movies were just coasting on brand recognition and Blumhouse cheap budget. High profit formula rather than any real audience love, that is. The first Purge 2018 even ended up being the highest grossing out of the bunch, but it wasn't because people loved it, it was because people just like me kept giving the concept one chance to be good. And then of course by the time the Forever Purge 2021 hit, interest was pretty much dead. It pulled in way less money than before, and yeah, you can blame COVID a little, but let's be real, people were just burned out. And as for the TV show, no, I didn't watch it. And before someone screams in the comments about, I missed the best part of the franchise, let me stop you. If you want to waste hours watching 2 seasons of that thing, be my guest. Go make your own review. Seriously, I'm not getting paid for this. I do it purely for fun, so forgive me if I'm not about to binge a mediocre spin-off for homework. That's what summaries and wikis are for, and trust me, they were not from what I gathered. The show tried some different angles, like actually showing non-murder crimes and exploring other perspectives, but it got cancelled after 2 seasons anyways. If that really was the best thing to come out of the franchise, then that just kinda proves how badly everything else flopped. And while we're at it, if you're gonna complain, at least subscribe for God's sake. Today, the Purge doesn't command the pop culture buzz it once did. What began as a provocative conversation starter kind of faded into the background noise of mediocre horror franchises. Yeah, the movies made money and have their fans, and Blumhouse certainly isn't sad about the over $500 million the series grossed in total. There's even talk of a Purge 6 eventually. They just can't let it die, huh? But numbers aside, artistically and culturally, The Purge never became the important, smart franchise it wanted to be. It remained a pulpy exploitation series that thought it was saying something huge when it kind of just wasn't. If all you wanted was creepy masks, a few jump scares and some gore, sure, it delivered, but the idea was always more exciting than the movies themselves, which is why a cartoon parody is remembered more fondly than the actual franchise. In the end, The Purge will be remembered more for its concept than its execution. Purge Night became instantly recognizable, but the films never broke free from their gimmick. Profitable, yes, but also one of the biggest waste of opportunities in modern horror. And that's basically all I got on The Purge, a franchise that somehow managed to take a great idea and make it blander every single time. And yeah, I know all of this sounds harsh, but honestly, what the fuck were you expecting? This isn't exactly some tiny indie scrapping pennies together. Outside of the first film, these movies had legit budgets, solid casts, and a premise that could basically sell itself. You think that with all that in place, we'd at least get one decent entry, but no. Anyways, if you liked the video, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It actually helps a ton. And seriously, thank you guys for 1,000 subscribers. That's something I've dreamed about ever since I was a kid, and it still feels kind of unreal that we're here. I promised I'd do the Carolina Reaper or One Chip Challenge for the face reveal, so that's coming real soon, and I've also got something big planned that I can't wait to show you. Drop the word pickle in the comments so I know you made it all the way to the end. And if I messed anything up, skipped something important, or you just have ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments below. See you in the next one.